The Blind Men and an Elephant is a parable that conveys the theory that all perspectives of God could be true, but simply demonstrate different aspects of God. Before I share my response to this parable, let me read to you a brief description of the parable from Wikipedia. The parable of the blind men and an elephant is a story of a group of blind men who have never come across an elephant before and who learn and imagine what the elephant is like by touching it. Each blind man feels a different part of the elephant's body, but only one part, such as the side or the tusk. They then describe the elephant based on their limited experience, and their descriptions of the elephant are different from each other. In some versions, they come to suspect that the other person is dishonest, and they come to blows. The moral of the parable is that humans have a tendency to claim absolute truth based on their limited subjective experience, as they ignore other people's limited subjective experiences, which may be equally true. The parable originated in the ancient Indian subcontinent, from where it has been widely diffused. So while I was in the New Age movement, I agreed with this view. I thought of it in other similar metaphors, that different perspectives of God are like different pieces of one puzzle that form the complete puzzle, or like different squares of a quilt that make up the complete quilt. You get the idea. I believe that this theory serves two attractive purposes. One is that it's inclusive, and inclusivity seems to be a top value in our culture today. So that's an attractive perspective. Next, there's at least some humility in it. There's almost a sense of not wanting to put all your eggs in one basket or one idea of God because, well, what if you're wrong? So it leaves room for human fallibility. The basic argument in the parable, at least from my perspective, is subjective reality versus objective reality. The parable seems to want to lean towards a subjective view of God, but it leaves me with some questions and thoughts. Number one, the elephant. It begins with an elephant that the blind men cannot see, but can touch and probably smell. But it begins with this thing called elephant, and it's singular. It's not blind men and the elephants, or blind men and a bunch of different animals, or blind men and some creature that's abstract or even formless. In reality, while these men are perceiving through their other senses different parts of the elephant, the writer chooses an elephant which exists as an absolute fact in reality. No matter how they perceive it, it's there and it's an elephant. There are certain scientific facts about the elephant which are absolute. So we know that no matter how they perceive it, does not change what it is. It's still an elephant. Their perception has no power to change it. The elephant is an absolute, not a subjective fact. Number two, there is only one elephant, which to me supports the idea of one God, at least in this parable. They're all perceiving one thing, different aspects of the one thing, but one thing. So even though this parable leans towards a subjective view of God, to me it doesn't seem entirely inclusive. It does not seem to support the idea of polytheism or many gods. If it did, it might have had the blind men perceiving many elephants or many other creatures. Also, while the blind men are perceiving different parts of the elephant and therefore having different perspectives, one can imagine that none of their perspectives contradict each other. For example, No one has the perspective that it's covered in spikes, or that there are scales, or that there are flowers growing out of it, but that they each have a perspective that is consistent with what an elephant is like. Whereas when you take the different world religions and you compare their views of God, they contradict one another, at least in significant aspects. There may be some parallels, but there are some significant conflicts which make them mutually exclusive. So you cannot hold both views simultaneously. The different views point to different things. For example, Muslims deny that God is a trinity, whereas Christians view God as a trinity. Both cannot be correct at the same time. So it's one thing to say in an inclusive way, I respect everyone's right to their own perspective. It's another thing to say that all perspectives are true at the same time when these perspectives contradict and cancel each other out. Now, you could say, maybe those views, maybe they could both be wrong, or maybe they could both be incomplete. But this wouldn't be inclusive, this would be dismissive. The last alternative then, if we want to dismiss all religious views of God, would mean that how we view God is left to our own devices. So God is what we choose to believe God is. And of course we can do that, but it doesn't change what God is if God is real. So we can all agree that some things in life are subjective and some things are objective reality. What something is, in its essence, is objective. Our thoughts about them, or our understanding of them, or our feelings about them, those are subjective, but they don't change the thing's essence. For example, ice cream is ice cream. We're all on the same page as to objective facts about ice cream. It's frozen, it melts, it's made of sugar and cream, and whether you like its taste or flavor, texture, or appearance, these are subjective preferences. But I wonder, are we putting God in the category of preference? Are we choosing a view of God based on preference? And should we be doing that? So I used to hold the view that all perspectives could be different aspects of God and that all paths could lead to God. But I no longer hold this view. And why? So for me, it's a combination of personal experience, having a relationship with Christ, along with research that I've done, and along with hearing others' personal conversion testimonies. From things that I have seen and read, I've come to believe that the gospel story is true. So I'll share one piece of evidence that has convicted me. There are historical texts outside of the Bible that confirm that there were followers of Christ who believed they witnessed the risen Christ after his crucifixion. After his disciples claimed that they saw the risen Christ, they then went on to preach the gospel at great risk to themselves, to the point of imprisonment, torture, and death. Now, I can't imagine anyone putting themselves in such great harm if they hadn't witnessed what they claimed they had witnessed. So they were willing to die for this. For me, this is huge. But I can also point you to a few resources if you're interested in more evidence or in Christian apologetics. There are the documentaries The Case for Christ by the journalist Lee Strobel. The Case for the Resurrection is another great one. And then C.S. Lewis's book, Mere Christianity, is another good source. So the parable of the blind men and the elephant, for all of its intention of inclusivity, isn't necessarily unbiased. It's a Buddhist story. So on that note, I'm going to drop a link in the description of the personal testimony of a Buddhist man who converted to Christianity. And I'll go ahead and add a link for a Muslim to Christianity testimony as well. I believe that listening to others' personal experiences can be very enlightening and powerful. But if you're curious and you're seeking, I would encourage you to do your own exploring and to reach out to Christ. Let him know that you're exploring and that you're wanting to know the truth. Give him the opportunity to reveal himself to you and see what happens. See if anything shifts. So with that, I thank you for watching. And if you like this message, please feel free to like and subscribe. And otherwise, God bless and take care.